Welcome back into Thimbleberry U. I'm John Jagay, joined again by Amy Walls. Amy, good to be with you.
Jag, it's great to be talking to you.
So today we're talking about a different kind of topic. It's not a fun, upbeat one like we would normally discuss, but it's still really important. And it's about preparing when you find out that you're dying. Amy, what brought this on and prompted you to want to talk about this today?
Yeah. So first of all, let me share that I'm going to try and keep it together emotionally as we talk about this. So recently, a friend that I've known for about 20 years found out that she is dying and has a few months to live. This came as a big surprise. She's a healthy person, and really there was no indication that anything was wrong. It just caught everyone unaware. And I want to talk about this because I'm seeing her and her husband struggle not only with the weight of the emotions of this, but also trying to organize their financial lives for the next few months. It's the next few months while she's here, and then also to prepare for that transition after she's passed. And it's something a lot of us don't think about.
Well, first of all, I'm really sorry to hear about your friend. We hope this never happens for our listeners, of course. We've seen, unfortunately, over 600,000 Americans die in the last year and a half that we're expecting to still be here right now. So this certainly can, I'm sure, resonate with a lot of our listeners. But again, there's an important side of this, and that's to be prepared for the unexpected. So let's get into some things that can and probably should be part of our lives that people can prepare for in a situation like this.
Yeah. So first, I'll share that since I learned of this news, I have definitely hugged my kiddos a little tighter at night. I read an extra bedtime story. I snuggle a little longer. I'm less go back to your bed when they come down to my room in the middle of the night.
Right.
I also, I'm spending a little more time quietly with my husband in the evening before jumping into a project like I normally would. So I think there are definitely things that we can all do one-on-one just from being present.
Yeah.
Secondly, there's basic estate planning. This is something that overall we're busy and we get busier, and, technology is supposed to be our friend in this, but I'm going to say it's made our lives busier and we run at faster speeds, and lack of time, knowing it's going to cost some money, and lack of feeling like it's going to be necessary or needed at any point in the near future are some of the reasons people put off their estate planning.
I totally understand what you mean there, Amy. And for one thing, if I've got a document that I'm supposed to fill out with my CPA, it's been sitting on my desk for weeks and months, just on a small insignificant scale compared to what we're talking about here. But, well, I could just watch something on Netflix and thumb through Facebook on the couch while I'm sitting there with my wife. And on a more serious note, nobody wants to think about their own mortality.
No.
Nobody wants to think about the idea that I might not be here tomorrow or next week or next month or next year. So if we can stay distracted and think about other things, it's almost like a defense mechanism. It's like the fingers over in your ears and hands over your eyes. La, 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 la. It's not happening. If I'm not thinking about it, it's not something I have to deal with. I'm just going to put it to the side and not worry about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in putting in place these estate documents, it's not just the doing of it, but you're right. There's thinking about it, right? Who do I want my kids to go to when I'm not here? And I'm going to, I'll probably mention my kids a lot in this situation because it's, for me, as I think about applying this to my own life, that's where I go.
That's your priority if something were to happen to you, sure.
Yep. And so, who do they go to? That's something that can be hard. It can be hard for a couple to decide. It can be hard for an individual to decide. Who do I want my money to go to? In making those decisions, there's a lot of family dynamics that have to come to the surface.
Sure.
There's financial powers of attorney as part of estate planning documents. So who do I want to make money decisions for me if I'm not able to make those decisions? Who do I want to make healthcare decisions for me, right? And this is just while we're healthy.
Yeah.
Is there somebody that I trust to make those decisions and will carry out my wishes? And then also making sure beneficiary designations are updated. That's not necessarily part of putting estate planning documents in place, but it's a vital part of making sure your estate planning documents are going to be executed on and that money goes where you want it to.
I've seen horror stories of people who have been divorced and remarried and they never updated their beneficiary and something happens to them. And well, it would seem obvious that you would want the new wife or the new husband and not the old one to be a beneficiary. But if you haven't made those legal changes, your hands are tied.
Yeah. It's one reason we actually review beneficiaries on all of our clients' accounts once a year.
Very important.
They do change. They change much more frequently than even we as advisors who see them changing anticipate.
Very true. So these are things that anybody and everybody should be thinking about, these financial and healthcare powers of attorney, wills, beneficiary designations. And like I said earlier, we all want to feel invincible. None of us wants to think about our own mortality and the idea of us not being here. But as you mentioned with your friends, sadly, this is a fact of life where things happen and you may find yourself in a situation where you've got some really horrible news. And if that's the case and all of a sudden you're face to face with this kind of thing, what would you suggest to someone who is in that situation?
Yeah, there's a couple things that come to mind as being important to do right away. And I don't know which one comes first, but taking stock of your financial situation and taking stock of your priorities, I think are the two that they just both need to happen. Taking stock of your financial situation is when you're no longer here is what's going to help others.
Yes.
Right? You're not impacted ultimately because you're not here to experience what happens. But, is this going to be easier for your spouse because you take care of these things? Is it going to be easier if you're single and your parents are helping with this for them to execute, or your siblings, or, whoever that is? Taking stock of priorities. I don't know how this could not happen in this situation.
Yeah.
I am sure you could do a lot of Netflix and such to ignore it. But I think for many people, it's going to happen. It's maybe how much do you let yourself acknowledge how you're feeling and what your priorities are.
Maybe that could be something as simple as calling an old friend or relative that you've been estranged from and saying, hey, let's bury the hatchet here. Let's get ourselves and our relationship into a better place. Or spending time, as you mentioned earlier, with your spouse or your kids, that kind of stuff. I mean, you hear stories like that every day of people getting a horrible diagnosis of something and they say, all right, I only have X number of time left. I want to maximize that, whether it's spending time with your family or bucket list stuff like skydiving. I'll make a joke here to lighten the mood a little bit. Yeah. But what do you want to do and accomplish and experience in the time that you have left?
Absolutely. And once you've done those two things, sure enough, especially on the secondary priorities, that might change with a little more time, right?
Sure.
It's figuring out then how to ensure that you're able to handle both of those. And I think lastly, and we alluded to this, my suggestion would be to make space for yourself in this.
Okay.
There's a lot of people who are, the consummate caregiver, and they're going to worry about others in this situation more so. They may need to worry more about themselves and making sure they can take some time and that they're giving themselves permission to say, hey, today is a bad day, emotionally, physically, whatever, and that they can take that space for themselves and that it's always okay. And so pushing through some of these things, what I'm trying to say with taking space is you may lay out a plan to tackle making sure your financial situation's in order and to tackle these priorities. And it just may be a day or a week where it's not going to happen.
And that's okay.
It's absolutely okay. And give yourself grace on that.
You and I have talked in previous episodes, Amy, about different personality types when it comes to managing money, but I think it's applicable in this situation as well. There is the type A, classic type A person where they want to take care of all this stuff. I've got my to-do list. I'm going to bang through it. I'm tick those items off the list.
Wait, Jack, did you just hold up a mirror?
That is not me at all, actually.
You held up a mirror to me.
Okay. But a person in this situation with that personality type, to your point, might have to say, okay, you know what? I still have these 3 items I planned on doing today. I'm just having a day. I'm having a day. A friend of mine was telling me that her and her husband have that code for each other now if they don't want to talk about something. Honey, I'm having a day. So you can have a day.
Yes.
And wait till the next day or the next couple days to do that to-do list. But also, the other point, the caregiving side, and this is probably where I'll turn the mirror on myself, Amy. But if I think that, okay, my personality is if, God forbid, were something to happen to me, I would be worried about my wife and probably the dog too. But I would be worried about them and being okay for them. And I would have to fight the instinct to say, okay, let me take a moment to myself. What do I need? And having to fight your instincts, no matter what your personality type is, to really make sure that you are in the right headspace, and the self-awareness is so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My husband would be telling me to take the space. I would be trying to push through, I imagine.
Yeah. So let me dive in a little bit deeper on something you mentioned a moment ago, Amy, and that is taking stock of your financial situation, because this is your wheelhouse. What specifically should somebody be doing if they find themselves facing something like this?
It's making sure you've identified where all your money is, what the accounts look like, pull statements, look at them, looking at the details of the accounts, and identifying if anything needs to change, if you have time to make changes and you're capable of making changes. It's also identifying the people, professionals and personal contacts that need to know about each other.
Yes.
And so some things as you look through these documents and take a look at your account are, one, have you done the estate planning we just talked about? And if you have already done it, are you happy with it as it is? Mm-hmm. Right? Just because you've done it doesn't mean maybe it doesn't need an update. If it's 10 years old, you might want to get with an attorney and just review it one more time.
You might have checked the box to say you did it, but the more you think about it and your priorities change and your perspective changes, there might be some changes you want to make.
Absolutely. Also, in identifying where these accounts are, making a list and who the contacts are, also looking at who the beneficiaries are on the accounts. Mm-hmm. Are those who you want them to be? If you have joint accounts, like with a spouse, it may be beneficial to ensure that the non-ill spouse is the primary account owner on the account, mm-hmm. because it might make things easier with a process that's called death settlements.
Okay.
Of taking the other owner, once they've passed, off of the account. Mm-hmm. In doing that, there's a couple questions to figure out. Will any of the accounts be frozen upon death? That can happen. So if we're talking about bank accounts, that's especially scary because the spouse may need access to that money.
Everything for paying monthly bills to even funeral expenses.
Exactly. And if that account gets frozen at death, well, what are they now using?
Yeah.
So these are some questions to understand ahead of time and maybe make some adjustments. If you know the account's going to get frozen, does the spouse who's expected to survive, do they need to open an account in their name and you move some money there? Do you want to gift anything to family while you still can, either while you're alive or add it into your estate planning? And then another question to think about is with life insurance, and that is, does your life insurance have an accelerated benefit rider?
What does that mean? It
basically means that, let's say you have $1 million life insurance policy. So at your passing, Jag, your wife's going to get $1 million, assuming she's your beneficiary. An accelerated death benefit rider basically says there's some portion of that money that you can access if you find out, for example, you have less than a year to live.
Okay.
So then her death benefit that she receives will be smaller, but it lets you perhaps cross off some of those bucket list items.
Oh, that's a really interesting point. I'm glad you made that. I would not have even thought to look into something like that.
Yeah, there is one more thing with that, though. I don't mean to be pontificating, but I think it's important on that to recognize that you got the life insurance so that whoever is going to get those proceeds will be okay at your passing, right? So if you take 50% of them and use them to do a trip around the world for the next 2 months,
hike Machu Picchu or something,
are you going to still leave that person okay?
Important.
Yeah.
I guess that might depend on the relationship you have with your beneficiary. And again, I don't mean to make light of it, but I know it's a really heavy topic, so I'm trying to keep things light where we can. That is a really good point. You know, the accounts and knowing where all that stuff is. I remember a couple of years ago, my wife was having surgery and she was undergoing general anesthesia. And my wife handles the money in the house. She handles the bills. She knows where everything is. She had to tell me, look, there's a tiny percent of a percent that something could happen here. But just in case, here's where everything is.
Yeah.
And then, of course, if you find yourself in a situation like we're talking about today, that becomes a lot more real and you want to make sure that the person knows where everything is.
Along those lines, this is something people can do ahead of time, too. It goes with estate planning. Setting up online password vaults.
Yes.
It's so valuable. And some of them have what I will call beneficiary or incapacity features on them that if something does happen to you, it allows someone else to get access to those accounts. And that's valuable because right now everything is electronic for people.
It is.
You can't watch the mail and hope that over 3 months all statements are going to come in so that someone has figured out where your money is.
And for something like this, I know there are a lot of these types of services out there. You need one username and one password to get into the system that somebody has set up for you so that you can access everything else. It's not about having 30 Post-its all over your desk with this account number and this password and all that. Like, having that all in one spot can be a very useful tool.
Yes.
So finally, Amy, we'll bring this around full circle here. We talked about this in the beginning, and that is setting priorities. What do you mean by this? Do you mean like the bucket list kind of stuff, or what do you mean by priorities?
Yeah, it may be the bucket list kind of stuff. And it may also be what I would consider simpler, quieter priorities. I think oftentimes when we think about bucket list, it's the big, big things we want to cross off. And this is probably where I'm going to get a little choked up. Since I got this news, I've thought about what I'd do differently if it were my life. And my kids and my husband are where I focus on this. And
sure.
I especially think about the things and the milestones in my kids' life that I would not be there for, that I would want to make special for them.
You're going to get me choked up now too.
If that's graduation or marriage or, birth of children, if those things happen for them, just special birthdays and things where I'd probably want to be writing letters and making videos and things for them to be able to have at those times. I wouldn't put that on my bucket list. And yet it's something that would be very important to me and would come before probably my bucket list items.
Wow, that's really powerful.
It's also, as you mentioned earlier, who do you want to reconcile with?
Yeah.
And making your own funeral or memorial service arrangements. Those might be items to consider in that.
Yeah, those are all really important and powerful things to think about. And what I like about these conversations and these podcasts that you and I do together, Amy, is that we talk about the financial stuff, which is absolutely your area of expertise and your wheelhouse. But we also talk about the human stuff and the personal stuff. And I think this is why I know you have such great relationships with clients of yours, because you take that 360-degree approach. It's not just about dollars and cents and where the money goes and where it's being saved and all that. It's about getting to know folks. And just like you and I do in this podcast, I know that's how you operate with your clients at Thimbleberry Financial. So if somebody wants to talk to you to start a relationship with you for their future and all aspects of it, what are the best ways to find you?
Yeah, well, Jag, before I share that, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for recognizing that. I do think that what we do is much more about the whole person than just the financial side. So if somebody wants to reach us, they can find us on the web at thimbleberryfinancial.com. There's a schedule a consultation page that they can fill out, and we'll get a message and get back with them. Or they can give us a call at 503-610-6510.
All right, really powerful stuff and important stuff, Amy. And thank you for sharing your personal story today. And we'll talk again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jag.
Registered representative. Securities offered through Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisor representative. Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Thimbleberry Financial are not affiliated.